Hello, everybody. This is ADHD and attention coach Jeff Copper. We are here today doing our first YouTube live adventure, I'm going to say, an information session. What this is all about is I am introducing a new field of engineering called cognitive ergonomics from the inside out, which is actually a new ADHD intervention. And my hope is to start doing regular live sessions like this to educate people on what this new intervention is all about and begin to share what this new intervention can reveal. I want to talk to you guys about it a little bit today about what it is and what it's about. And really what my hope is to leverage the people that have been with me on YouTube for so many years, which I love all of you. You guys are amazing. I have a few videos on cannabis and stuff like that gets a lot of comment, but the rest of it, I'm really flattered a lot of times when somebody will make a comment and say, you know, you kind of get this type of a thing, or this is really helpful. And the idea here really is you guys have really been an inspiration for this. And I've been sharing a lot of this over the years as I've been building this model. And my hope is to share this with you. And my ask is you actually help get the word out to other professionals that help those with ADHD to let them know that there is a new intervention that's promising. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit because I got a lot of business challenges associated with this, but really my target audience are other people out there that recognize our current interventions fall short. So I want to kind of just walk through a brief review of what this is about, talk about my business challenges. I'm hoping that people will be jumping on and we can kind of field some questions a little bit down the road, but I really wanted this to be kind of a kickoff. So bear with me because I'm getting used to the live technology. So I kind of want to say, here's where we are with ADHD. In my opinion, and a lot of people don't like this word, we're really cognitively illiterate. We make observations using our senses at some point in time, aided by technology. But in the world of ADHD, we're making observations based off our senses and what we can see. And we do a lot of inferring of the inner workings of the brain based off of what we see. Now, and forgive me, I have to kind of look over at slides here to know where I am. Now, I personally will acknowledge that behavior is changeable. You take dogs to dog training class, you have children, you can work with them and you can form their behavior to comply to something. But in studying Dr. Russell Barkley's model, it's clear to me that ADHD is an executive functioning impairment. And the things about impairments is they require accommodations. So my eyesight is impaired. With glasses as an accommodation, I can begin to see what I'm capable of. And one of my points is there's really no amount of behavioral training that you could do to get me to read, at this point, my eyesight's so poor, without that accommodation. And so, bear with me with the slides because this is new. The fine print here is that impairments have an impact on behavior. And I personally think that there's a lot of ADHD interventions out there that are behavioral related that fall short. And the reason that they do is they're not accommodating the underlying impairment. So at the end of the day, what's obvious really depends on what you're paying attention to, which is something I've been talking about for years. And a lot of my YouTube channel has been based in what I consider objective observations and looking at things. And if you're looking at them and they're not working, then you're probably not looking at the right thing. So I think that what we really needed in this world is to look at ADHD a little differently. And we need some type of technology to make observations. So much of the ADD world, people are looking at symptomatic observations, behavior based off of your opinions or your beliefs, etc. And we need to have some type of means to bring some type of precision to this. So what we really need is a new technology. Now we're going to talk about engineering in a moment, but in order to problem solve anything from an engineering perspective, there's a few requirements. The first thing that you need is you need some type of model that has very specific definitions. And that model needs to have repeatable patterns that's explained by the model. So if we looked at Darwin's theory of evolution, that's a model that we've been using to understand evolution for a long period of time. Newton's laws of motion within physics, Maxwell's equations in terms of electricity. Again, we've got to have something that makes some sense. Years ago, people were sick. We didn't know what to do with them. We really needed to understand what to look for, that being a virus and a germ. We also need some type of technology to begin to make observations of what we've defined. So like a microscope we use to observe viruses and germs, okay? There are stethoscopes, telescopes, microscopes, MRIs, CAT scans, ultrasounds, etc. These are required in order for us to problem solve. And I have developed something called AttentionScope, and it's trademarked for a reason. Attention being as I want you to be able to see it, and scope being the means to see it. These two pieces of technology, I think, are paramount and the fundamental foundation of this new field of engineering that I'm putting on, because for the first time, we have something that's very specific that we can define to say, this is what we should look for. And we have a mechanism being AttentionScope to actually begin to see these things. So cognitive ergonomics from the inside out is actually being brought about because we have Dr. Barkley's model or definitions of executive functions. We have AttentionScope. We can make objective observations. And so now we can take an engineering approach to problem solving. In the world of engineering, there's something called Six Sigma. It's a methodology that you use to define problems and identify root causes. It's these two things, the technology, Dr. Barkley's model, and AttentionScope, that makes everything possible, because we now have a way to look past emotion or observation, look past symptoms, and really begin to identify the root cause of some of the challenges. Now, I will note, I'm billing this as a new ADHD intervention, and it is, but the title of this is not ADHD ergonomics from the inside out. It's cognitive ergonomics, because this model applies as much as it does to people with ADHD as it does to neurotypicals. Now, it doesn't necessarily work for autism, schizophrenia, and some other types of things. This is really from the cognitive executive function impairment and why it's made possible. So really what it is, it's a new paradigm. New paradigms are a change in our assumptions. It's a change in our fundamental way of looking at things. New paradigms are the types of things that can begin to explain what old paradigms couldn't. I have a couple examples of some major paradigms, like the world going, at one time we believed it to be flat, then we looked at it to be round. At one point in time, we thought we were the center of the universe. And later we discovered is that actually we rotated around the sun, among other things. Paradigms are really revolutionary, again, because they take a look at things differently. Now, one of the things that I'm doing with this program is I'm just Jeff Copper. I'm a trained life coach that specializes in people with ADHD. I'm not an engineer by trade, nor am I a mental health professional. So who am I to sit there and say I have invented or developed or engineered a new field of engineering called cognitive ergonomics, which, by the way, there is such a thing as cognitive ergonomics, but it's from the outside in. This is from the inside out, which we'll talk about in a second. So one of the purposes of educating the people that have been following me on YouTube that kind of know my stuff is to help me get the word out there, because there's going to be a lot of resistance to my model because it doesn't fit the current mindset. Again, more on that in a bit. Now, I want to explain that engineering is a field of study that's designed to solve problems. Again, we talked about it. You need certain things to engineer. There's chemical engineering, civil engineering, bioelectrical engineering, mechanical engineering, et cetera. But there's also a field of study called systems engineering, which is about building systems. There's a subfield of systems engineering called ergonomics. It's about fitting the job to the user. It's quite advanced in the physical world. That's why we have adjustable desks and adjustable chairs, et cetera. The reason they need to fit it to the user is to increase safety, increase productivity, and reduce stress and strain. In the cognitive world, there is such a thing, but it's quite primitive. Cognitive ergonomics, what I hope from the inside out, is what I'm going to hope is kind of revolutionize it, because for the first time, we're going to make cognition tangible to individuals so they can participate. And the notion of cognitive ergonomics on the inside out is to fit the cognitive task to the brain or the executive functions of the individual. This is a huge contrast, all right? In the past, what we've done, executive function coaches, they teach skills. The idea is to get your behavior to conform to a process to get to an outcome. What makes cognitive ergonomics from the inside out different is we're focused in on accommodating the process of thinking to get to outcomes. Again, we're no longer trying to get people to change their brain or to conform. We want to give it an accommodation. In other words, I'm no longer trying to force myself to read using my glasses. I want to use my glasses as accommodation in order for me to read. This is a titanic shift in how we look at ADHD and go about it. But fundamentally, that's what this is about. The other thing about this is, it enables us to bring a problem-solving methodology. And the way I like to describe it is when you go out on the internet, people are looking for tips, tricks, and strategies. And I like to say, think of a tip or a trick as like an equation. E = mc squared is a great equation, but it's not going to solve for the sides of a right triangle. That's where you need the Pythagorean theorem. Cognitive ergonomics, and this is going to give everybody the willies, is a little bit like word problems. The idea is you read a bunch of stuff, you identify relevant variables, and then you have to organize those variables in a way to solve the problem. We didn't really like it very much in math, but it is really important we learn math to use that later. The idea here is to teach people how to derive an equation that will work for your brain. Again, this is a big departure between the guesswork that we've done in the past and taking a look at your individual brain, the situational variability, and try to come up with something that will accommodate it. Cognitive ergonomics is one of those things that has kind of come along. It's really happened because I was first listening to Dr. Russell Barkley, I think it was in 2010, argued that ADHD had to be an executive function impairment, and he argued it from 7 different perspectives. It was fascinating to me. I interviewed him for the first time in 2011, really trying to understand the model, and have been studying it ever since. And it's been profound to me because his model is phenomenal. Not only does it help you understand ADHD, helps you understand anomalies that other paradigms can't explain, but the model actually begins to explain itself when you understand it. It actually explains some problems where there's actually executive functions that are in mutual conflict. They're both getting in each other's way. It's really helpful in the people that I've coached by helping them understand this conflict and play out, because that gives them the awareness to really override it. I'd also like to add is that over the years, as I've been studying Dr. Barkley's model and developing attention scope, it's literally cut my coaching time like 60 and 70% for those, particularly for those that don't struggle with emotional regulation. Those that are way on the end, they struggle a little bit more. So bear with me just a second. So fundamentally, let me see if I can take this down. Fundamentally, cognitive ergonomics is a new paradigm and a new way of going about doing this. And what I'm hoping to do is get this out into the public and mainstream it so that ultimately I'm going to get to businesses and schools. Businesses and schools. Now think about it right now. If you have ADHD and you need an accommodation, typically you've got to have a doctor write some type of note. Doctors are really good at diagnosing conditions, but they're not engineers. They're not proficient at identifying accommodations. So we kind of have the wrong people doing it. What cognitive ergonomics also brings to the table is it's a science, if you will, of defining executive functions so that people can be skilled in the proficiencies at accommodating the impairment. Now, there are some accommodations that are going to be somewhat tangible, but what the model also reveals, many of the accommodations for ADHD are actually intangible. They're actually hidden in plain sight. They're around you, But because of people's misconceptions and expectations and the fact that it's intangible, they can't see them. Literally, they're in plain sight. What the model does is it reveals them, and it does it in such a way that it defines these accommodations and reveals them in such a way that I think people have to pay attention to it. The idea here really is if we can mainstream this and Americans with Disability Act can own it, then employers and schools would be forced to provide these accommodations. Now, understand, I'm not trying to degrade either institution, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a way to prove something's effective, you're not going to spend the money on it, or you're going to be reluctant. What I hope is cognitive ergonomics from the inside out is going to provide the means in which to define these and legitimize these accommodations, mainstream them, and help people recognize them for what they are. Now, I'm reaching out to you for a very specific reason. The claim that I have come up with this new paradigm is really an outrageous claim. Again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just a life coach that's trained in ADHD. So it warrants skepticism, honestly. This and many other things that I'm doing right now is, if I'm making such a proclamation, if you will, people have the right and I have the obligation to explain to them what makes this different, which is what we've been talking about thus far. Now, what I'm trying to do efficiently is I need to get to people that recognize the current interventions fall short. Now, understand, in the mental health field, that's a whole paradigm that people are married to. Their dependency is either on that model, or they cling to it so hard that they don't necessarily recognize that at times it falls short. I'm not going to probably be able to convince that crowd that this is something, because again, they're invested in it. What I'm looking for is the people that have doubt, the people that are like, this really isn't working too well. Those are the people that I'm trying to get to, specifically professionals. Now, if you have ADHD, this program can be very helpful for you. It's absolutely amazing. I don't want to deny this. But if I'm going to get this where I really want to go, I need therapists. I need teachers. I need special ed teachers. I need disability specialists. I need like parents. I need the greater people at large to become educated about this intervention so that they can get it to the employers in the schools and the mass to legitimize it. And so, in doing this, it's hard for me to go to therapists. I could educate them, but I'd have to do CEUs, but I'd have to be a therapist to do that. Similarly with teachers, right? Really difficult for me to deal with the mental health field. Parents, if I can get their attention, it's there. But really what I'm hoping is that you, the people with ADHD, know a therapist or know of a teacher or know of somebody out there who you can see in their eyes, they're a little frustrated. They're trying to help you, but it doesn't work. And you can get their attention and say, hey, there's this guy that's got this new intervention, and I'd like you to maybe check it out. Now, I'm going to try to flash up on the screen this. If you go to cognitive-ergonomics.com, that'll take you to my website with some stuff on classes that we're releasing. But really what I'm looking to do is, if you could help direct professionals to this website, which is, and by the way, if you go to 𝐷IGcoaching.com on the upper right-hand corner, you can click on a button. It's got a webinar similar to this for them to look at, for me to talk to them about what this is all about. So if they're skeptical, they can make a determination if this is actually legitimate based off of what I presented and its own merits. And so that's my first business challenge. My second business challenge, I don't know if you've noticed, is that with AI, there's a lot of people now that can create content relatively easy that didn't before. So there's been an explosion of content creators. There's been an explosion of so-called gurus in this field, or any field really. It's very difficult to get out there and actually say, wait a second, as a thought leader, I've got something that's revolutionary above all that noise. So again, my marketing tack is to go to you and say, hey, let you judge what I'm talking about on its own merit. In future lives, I want to start talking about what the model's beginning to reveal. Much of stuff I've already shared on my channel, but to get it out there and to kind of get through all that noise of the gurus, because I'm not here to say your life is going to be better. I want you to understand that the reason that we have this is because we have technology that we didn't have before. I also hopefully going to do some more lives where I can begin to ask questions to educate you on really kind of what's all this about. So for those that have tuned in for our first live, thank you very much. It's been a little while in coming. Appreciate your patience. I'm not very good at reading comments and talking at the same time. So I have one of my assistant Pam's here that's reading them. And if there's no questions, no big deal. We're going to leave this up, hopefully for other people to look. But if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. So I'm going to say, Pam, by chance, do we have any questions so far?
We don't have any questions yet.
Okay.
Just a few comments.
All right. I hope this is inspirational, people. I hope it gives them hope. I also should sit there and say, if you're an individual with ADHD and you are observational, can look at facts and feelings, this is a really good program just from your own awareness. There is a crowd that is so emotional, exceptionally emotional, that they have a hard time really discerning their reflexive emotional thoughts with factual thoughts. This program really is not a very good fit for them. In fact, I will admit it can do them harm in as much as it will. The program will present a very hard mirror for them to look in. And if they're not open to it, they can get somewhat negative reaction and disappointed. So I really want to put that caveat in. There is a small segment of the population that this is not good for, and it could do some harm, but it's the people on the extreme emotional side. So glad I had a moment to get that in. So far, we don't have any questions. So I tell you what, I'm going to share a couple insights from the model, and then we'll call it a day. We'll schedule another one of these. One of the fascinating things about the world is we talk about procrastination, things that you're putting off. And what the model begins to reveal are two incredible correlations. One of them is, have you ever noticed there's a correlation between uncertainty and avoidance? Think about that. If you're not clear about something, have you noticed that you avoid it? Conversely, there's a high correlation between clarity and motivation. Think about that. If you know what to do and you're crystal clear and it's not boring, you typically do it. So let's talk about this in the context of the current paradigm. There's a lot of people out there that talk about, I need to get rhythm. I need to get momentum. Those are feeling-based observations. And people are trying to get to that feeling. With cognitive ergonomics and what we've just described is, if you want to get the rhythm and you want to get the feeling, then you need to be doing something. But more often than not, it's to get clarity. The root cause would be clarity. In fact, I think you'd be surprised, the majority of the things that you procrastinate on is rooted in ambiguity. The thing is, if you don't acknowledge that you don't know what it is or don't know what to do, you're not solving for the problem. What cognitive ergonomics, it reveals these types of things. So you can sit there and say, if I need to get momentum, what I probably should do is focus on getting clarity. Now, how you get that clarity, I'm not going to say simple, but the idea here was that we've identified the underpinning of the problem and that you can more succinctly address what the underlying issue is. So with that, Pam, do we have any last questions before I close this out?
Yes. Riley asks, I wonder if you might share some experiences or stories you've seen from people who have gone through cognitive ergonomics.
Wow, that's a big question for the time that we have. Let me think if I got a short one. One of my favorite stories is people with ADHD have a tendency to judge things. If it looks simple, then it must be. So I'm coaching an individual one time, and our second call, they were supposed to bring a list of things they procrastinate on. And I said, what do you got? And they said, I need to call my family and tell them about my daughter's dance recital. And I said, what's hard? Now, Six Sigma, in the regular engineering world, they use the 5 whats. In cognitive ergonomics, we use the regular engineering is the 5 whys. We do the 5 whats. So what's hard? The person said nothing. I said, seriously, what's hard? He said, Jeff, it's just a simple phone call. I said, come on, seriously, what's hard? He said, Jeff, it's a simple phone call. And I said, stop, look at yourself. It's the first thing on your procrastination list. And you know you're paying me money for this? Like, stop, look at it. Tell me what's hard. The guy goes, oh, I don't know. I guess they're going to ask me, where should I wear? Where should I park? And what do I bring? Now it's sounding hard. Now he's got to go back to his wife. Now she goes, can't you just do this one thing? What he didn't realize is that in the moment that he was asked for this task, he didn't stop and think as if he got the phone call, what questions he might need to ask to get that to go make the phone call. Now, this is a simple scenario here. But number one, if you're not doing something, it's not easy. You have to admit that it's hard. Even though it might look simple, that doesn't mean that cognitively it isn't. In this example, I began to sit there and say, he didn't really stop and think about what it was, which was a root of the problem. Given the self-awareness to understand where to resolve the problem, like when he gets these questions, he needs to stop and think about the information that he needs as opposed to automatically going on. What the model can begin to explain, something like that looks simple is cognitively more difficult than what you might imagine. So you need to admit it's harder than you think, because if you don't, you're not giving it the respect that it's due. Number two, there's also a level of self-awareness in there. So what I hope to do is provide more of these examples in future live events. And I do need to bring this together because I have to get ready for another phone call. But I'd like to thank everybody for participating today, or that are going to watch the rerun of this. I do ask you to share this with other people that you think are appropriate. And if you want to learn more, go to my website. But really what I would appreciate is you don't necessarily have to sign up for cognitive ergonomics, but I would like, watch the channel, watch what we have to offer. And please share this with other people out there who are skeptical that there's actually a new intervention and there's new hope for people with ADHD. And I'd like to thank Dr. Barkley. He's the guy who figured out the model. I was just kind of the knucklehead who figured out how to bring the tangibility to it, which I'll take credit for, but it's a really exciting day. So with that, I thank everybody for joining us. And again, catch us for future podcasts. And I also like to thank my assistant, Pam, for her help. So thanks, everybody. Take care.